Hello, everyone, and welcome to Interviewing for Success. My name is Eric Alexander. I'm the founder and CEO of TC Band, and we're excited to talk about interviewing and the interviewing process. We're honored to have Cheryl Bethune and her executive staff of recruiters to talk us through the specifics, advice, tips, suggestions that they have gained over their career that we can leverage to help you achieve your goals as it relates to interviewing, whether that's internal or external. So I'll start by talking about TC Band, our vision and our mission. And so our overarching objective is professional excellence through strategic collaboration. And we do this through our vision of leveraging the scale, scope, and skill embodied within our Black opinion networks and broader community to execute against three key objectives: delivering, building, and creating. So delivering quality professional development, building cross-organizational and community connections, and creating a safe space to learn, share, and grow together. And we're an incorporated 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. So the question when we put the series together was, is there interest in these topics across our community? And the answer was a resounding yes. So we had over 530 registrants across the three sessions. We had registrations from 26 states plus the District of Columbia, and we had registrations from three countries: the US, Canada, and Brazil. So we're excited about the level of interest and the support that we have for TC Band in general and specific to our virtual development series. And so this series includes three sessions. So the first session in the series was How You're Doing, a candid conversation about mental health and self-care with Dr. Ty. This session has been recorded, so if you go to our website, you can review that and learn from that session. It was a really great session. The next session we had was Growing Away, where we talked about the fact that many members of our community have to leave their home and their communities in search of career success. And it talked about the challenges associated with that from a stress and a mental health perspective. It talked about what your obligation is to your community to give back for those who gave to you, and then the challenges associated with managing the expectations around that space. So outstanding conversation. Due to the transparency and the candor of that conversation, we didn't record it, but for those who were there, it was an outstanding conversation. We're discussing a potential phase 2 for that, but that was a great session as well. And so what else do we have coming up after this session? So our annual summit is TC Band 16, Celebrating Progress, Developing the Future. It's also our 10-year anniversary. And it's a hybrid summit sponsored by NDI and hosted by General Mills. That'll be November the 4th. And so you should start seeing registration information around that next week. And then our last session planned for the year is our continued partnership with Harvard Business School. We have a session that's talked about towards a racially just workforce with Professor Tony Mayo from Harvard Business School. And so I would highly recommend both these sessions. They'll be outstanding. When I was at Harvard, I had the opportunity to sit through multiple sessions with Professor Mayo. And he has an outstanding perspective on DE&I. He leads DE&I for Harvard, and he has a unique perspective on the Black community based on some research that he's done for a couple of his books. So outstanding sessions. I'm excited about them personally, and I'm excited to create that opportunity for you guys to attend those sessions. And so now we transition to our session for today, Interviewing for Success. And so Cheryl Bethune will be moderating the panel discussion that will kick off the session. And then she will also be circling back on the back end, answering questions from the group. And so Cheryl and I have known each other for a while. She's an outstanding executive for General Mills. She has a unique perspective. She has a passion for the work she does. She has a passion for her community and her family. She serves on multiple boards. She mentors and coaches numerous people, including me when I was with General Mills, and I really appreciate that support. So she's an outstanding executive, a pinnacle of what executive presence looks like in execution. And I'm excited to afford you the opportunity to listen to her today. So with no further ado, I'll transition to Cheryl.
Thank you, Eric. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you talking about all the good things. Eric and I probably have some stories as well, but we're not going to go into that during our days together at General Mills. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. And as Eric, as much as he spoke about me, I knew that I couldn't do this alone. I wanted to make sure that I brought in the experts who live in the world of recruiting, all the way from entry level up to C-suite. to really give you the real. So as we talk about interviewing for success, we really want this to be about real talk. And I say with real recruiters in that they do this in and out, real because they're authentic, right? And they're going to ensure that you all get the inside scoop on what it means to interview successfully. And to me, a successful interview is you get the offer. Right? I tell people what's success? Success is you get the offer. So we want to have real questions with real stories so you guys can make an impact. So next slide, as I talk about, who's going to give us the scoop today, we have three phenomenal people. I'm just going to go through a quick introduction because they're going to get into talking about themselves as we get into the questions. We have Calvin Blackman. Calvin is, 10 years in this game in recruiting, but he's an athlete and at a high level. And when people say at a high level, that means they're being humble. That means they're really, really good. Athlete there. I happen to know it. He is Go Blue, Calvin. But he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself and what he brings. We have Victoria Quarterman. Victoria, not only is she a recruiter, she does executive coaching. She works in all levels of organization and C-suite. She's been on Wall Street. She's done a little bit on Broadway, which I think is phenomenal and so cool there. So we have Victoria, and she's the CEO and owner of her own recruiting firm. So excited about that. And then we have Sohail. So Sohail, 20-year veteran in the space. And I have the pleasure of working with him here at General Mills as he leads our diversity recruiting and strategic search practice. So all of them are going to bring their wealth of knowledge to you all today. And next slide, and how we're going to have it is we're going to have two parts to this. We're going to have a panel discussion. So I'm going to ask them some distinct questions, and then we're going to have some breakout sessions, right? And breakout sessions so you all can go very deep into individual questions, individual situations, and get more perspective. As we do the panel, we thought we'd talk about it. What do you need to do before the interview, right? How do you make yourself the attractive and the best candidate during the interview? Like, what does it mean to be successful during the interview? And then something that sometimes people often forget is, what do you need to do after? And I tell people it's more than sending the thank you note, right? So what do you need to do after to make sure that you're memorable and that you're remembered? So we're going to talk about interviewing for success before, during, and after. Okay, sound good?
Great.
Thumbs up. All right. So next slide. Before we get into the before, as a quick way for the panelists to introduce themselves, why don't they start out telling what's their why? Like, why did they get into recruiting? So whether they're working externally at a firm or internally within their own companies, what made them passionate about sourcing talent and specifically people of color? Maybe I'll start with you, Calvin, maybe a minute or less. Kind of what's your why?
Yeah, for sure. Great to see everyone this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're at. But for me, my why is, as Cheryl kind of alluded to, I'm a coach at heart, football coach at heart. And for me, not being able to do coaching full time, just a career path I didn't want to pursue. Getting into recruiting, being able to not only foster those relationships, but be able to see people develop and to see them, from when you first meet someone and they're looking for an opportunity to whether they get the opportunity or to where you circle back with them, to just see someone's progression and their growth from that day one to ultimately wherever they are, a year from now or 2 years from now, for me it's so rewarding just to be able to know that you had an impact, right? And if you can provide them some advice, coaching, or whatever it is, a connection, whatever that is, for me, I think that's the biggest thing that has drawn me to recruiting and why I love having conversations. And I'm very inquisitive as well. And I just love asking people questions, and just trying to really be mindful and be thoughtful about, who they are, what they're looking for, and maybe if I can potentially, be of value at some point. So that's my why.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Victoria.
Yeah, hi everyone. Ditto everything Calvin said. For me, it is personal. I've sat in rooms where executives have told me that they would like diverse talent, but they don't feel like it exists. So it is a challenge for me. Also, and it's not just that, it's also personal in that I feel like I am making an impact in people's lives. I'm very transparent with salary expectations and development. And I want to make sure that you, as the candidate, you're getting what you deserve. So if I'm working on an executive search, by the time we're at the offer stage, you're going to know my kids' names, their ages. You're going to know what I like, and I'm going to know everything about you. Believe it or not, we're going to be friends for life.
I love that.
So tell us a little bit about your why.
Cheryl, I can't promise that this is going to be under a minute, but I'll do my best. Piggybacking on Victoria, it's very personal for me. So I was born in Iran, and I am the son of 2 immigrants. And my folks knew pretty quickly that geopolitically, Iran was not a place to grow a family and have them be successful. And so they left Iran and came to the States. They both had really strong degrees and a really clear path to success for themselves. And when they came to the States, it was for myself and my sister, who wasn't born yet. And they both had to start over. And my dad had 2 to 3 jobs, and these were physically taxing jobs, laying down carpet, being on his feet, long shifts as a waiter or a busboy. My mom was a babysitter for the folks in the neighborhood. And so they started over. And my dad, being the grinder and family person that he is, knew he needed a bigger plan. And so he taught himself English. He taught himself IT at night. Man was all over the place. And eventually he got to a place where he was confident enough to put together the semblance of a resume and started applying to the US government for roles. And a brown recruiter saw his resume and saw his story and said, I'm going to give this guy a shot. And sure enough, coached my father and completely changed the trajectory of our family. We were financially insecure. We didn't take vacations. We didn't even have benefits. This is in the mid 80s. And with that job that he got at the US government, it completely changed our lives. We had paid vacation. My folks weren't stressed out about money all the time, and we had benefits. And so seeing the impact that person had and understanding the experience and journey that a brown person can have and just opening a door for my father was wildly impactful for me. And I decided that was how I was going to spend the rest of my time and life. And every internship or job I've ever had has been in the recruiting space. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you all. Thank you for that, and thank you all for your stories. I hope everyone can see how passionate the panelists are about what they do. And the good thing is they're not only available to you today, but at the end, or you already have their bios and contact, but they're going to be accessible to you all even post this session, which is really, really exciting. Okay, let's get into it. Let's get into some real talk. Let's start with before the interview. And maybe I'll start with you, Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what should we be doing to put ourselves in the best position to be a great candidate? And is there anything that's unique that we should be doing as Black people to be able to do that? Or if it's not unique, it's just maybe something you see that we don't do that you'd want to emphasize.
Yeah, I think we first need to just, and I know this is being recorded, and we want to be as transparent as possible, but, biases just exist, right? And it impacts company culture. None of us are able to fix that. So, you have to be your authentic self. Obviously, you want to do your research and be prepared for the interview. But one of the things you should always look for and think about is, will this employer or manager be an advocate for me? But have you, as a seeker, a job seeker, put any thought into what type of environment you want to be in order to be successful? Like, what are you really willing to endure? And so I do find that when individuals are ready to leave, something happened on their job, and they are jumping to the next thing without really sitting down and thinking about, doing some exploring other opportunities where their skills may be transferable, what really makes them happy, what type of environment, culture they want to work in. So I think there needs to be some self-reflection and thinking about looking at the revenue for that company. What's your salary expectation? Where do you want to be next? What type of development do you want? So there's a lot of that before really going into applying for a job and wasting your time.
I love that. I love that concept of self-reflection, before thinking about your next job. I love this thought of being authentic, but knowing your audience, right? I tell people, my authentic self running in the morning is different than my authentic self at a football game, which is different than my authentic self at the club.
Exactly.
Right? All of those are me, but I present differently at those situations because I know the environment and I know the audience. So you can be authentic, but it doesn't mean you don't have flexibility in how you present yourself.
Exactly.
Calvin, what would you add?
I would piggyback off of the authentic piece, but I would also say, or I guess say, and add to that is be intentional, right? And I think really being intentional about once you've identified, as Victoria talked about, identified, the environment and the type of career you want to go after, be intentional about seeking out all of the information that you can, but you want to ask those authentic questions, right? You really want to find the authenticity. What makes that place different, right? We are paid to ask questions, right? We ask questions, and the person you're going to be talking to at the organizations, we ask questions all day. I think I can speak for all recruiters. We love to be asked questions back that have been thought that are authentic. And I can tell that you put a lot of time and effort into it. So when you take time, and that may be sitting down for an hour and thinking through, your authentic self, what are you looking for? And then asking those questions to whoever that person is going to be, to ensure that, hey, they know that I took time and this is that I'm serious about these questions, because we get the generic ones all the time. But if they can tell that you've been authentic, it puts a smile on my face. As soon as someone I can tell asks me an authentic question right away, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a conversation that I'm truly going to enjoy. So that's what I would say, is just be very intentional about that aspect of asking those questions in your research and identifying the environment that you want to be in.
Yeah, I like that thought about being authentic and intentional, and not asking the surface question, not asking the question that's on the first page of the website. It can be answered there, which says you didn't do your homework, but really, what's the deep question that you have for the organization? So as we talk about authenticity, okay, here's a provocative question. Are there any stereotypes to avoid? We're in the year 2023, but we may not think there is, but are there any stereotypes that we should avoid as we start, thinking about interviewing or preparing ourselves for jobs?
Coming with the heat early, Cheryl.
Well, let me give you, we talk about authenticity. We've heard comments about names or dress,
Oh,
or hairstyles. Like, what's
Yeah.
the latest and the greatest about that? And that you expert recruiters would advise.
wow.
Oh, go ahead, Victoria, please.
No, that's such a great question. I mean, on a personal note, when I was working in corporate America, there was no way in hell I would show up with my hair like this. That's just something that I was taught. um, you know, my mentors even said it, you know, my hair was straightened, bone straight, flat, and flowy. And I was not my authentic self. Okay. Now, you know, things have really changed. I believe things have evolved. And I think that, you know, there's less emphasis on, I mean, we still deal with, you know, the hair issue and things of that nature, even the names. I know people who will change, you know, put their first initial of their first name and then have their last name on a resume. And I get it. Or they'll abbreviate their name. And, you know, but I do now more than ever, I don't necessarily see any issues or concerns with individuals who have, you know, locks or, you know, are able to wear their natural hair. Am I saying it no longer exists? No, that's not what I'm saying. But times have truly shifted, I believe. And that's just in my own personal experience.
Yeah, I think of the comment you made earlier, Victoria, around what you're willing to endure. And that's really, really powerful as it relates to this question, I think. And folks are at different parts of their lives and journeys in their professional careers. So they have to make decisions accordingly. But I think if you're in a position where you can be a little bit more intentional and really be discerning and have a very high bar for who you are willing to be employed by, and have those questions asked and really understand, like, what am I getting myself into? Do they give space and safety for brown, Black folks to show up as their authentic selves? I think it's a conversation you need to have with yourself, and then have that inform the strategy that you have when you engage with recruiters and engage with hiring teams. Because no one's going to ask those questions for you. No one's going to create that space for you. You have to ensure that that exists, or move on to another organization. And I think it's a really good question, Cheryl. And I think it's complicated.
It
but
is.
important one. It's an important one for sure.
No, I like it. And I like it. It links back to that authenticity and that intentionality,
Yeah.
right? As Calvin talked about, is part of intention is know the culture, right?
Mhm.
Know the organization and know where they stand on diversity and inclusion, you
Yeah.
know, there. Um,
Mhm.
and make sure that that's
Oh,
part of your decision making. That's your decision making process.
I'll add to that too. You know, there's been times where I'll speak with an organization, a potential new client or whatever it is, and I can tell. I don't say I can tell right away, but you can typically tell early on what their mindset is, or what their, you know, how they perceive, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. Sometimes if it feels like it's a forced conversation, a lot of times it may be the person you're talking to, or it could be, you know, it could be who the company really is. But I had a client I spoke to the other week, and he said, "We're 7 white men." He's like, "How, you know, we need to, and we want to change this." And I said, the fact that he was able to say that to me, right, and he was willing to say, "Let's figure this out. Let's have more conversations." Let me know that he was intentional about it, right, and truly want to be. But I think when you're talking to those organizations, if they feel uncomfortable even having that conversation, there's a lot more lying underneath. There's a lot more layers there that are going to be could be some red or yellow flags for you.
Absolutely. Well, you know how, your mother used to say, don't just date anybody, don't just work for anybody. Think about who you're going to work for. I love it. Slight twist. Before the interview is, let's talk about social media. Let's talk about what does it mean, kind of on social media. At one point it was, oh no, be careful, don't do anything on social media. Nowadays I've seen, no, be active, on social media, post articles, comment on articles. And, recruiters and employees are looking about where your expertise lies. How do you get involved there? Calvin, what's your perspective? What do you advise people about social media?
It's going to sound simple, but don't be stupid. I think it's right. I think it's a matter of, I used to freak out 20 years ago because someone created a Facebook page for me, and I never had but I wasn't interested, so it was just there. So then years later, I decided to create my own Facebook page. Well, now I had 2 Facebook pages. The one that was created for me was me running up the steps holding a beer. The other was me, more professional. But I always was concerned that someone were to pull up my social media at the time, they're going to see Calvin run up the steps holding a beer. Like, what does that say about who I am? To your point, I think we have moved past that because we realize that this is where the world lives and people are going to be who they are. And so I think it's just being, again, I think it's just being mindful of what you're putting out there in the content. We hear about it all the time in the NFL draft, and that's extreme. But you hear a kid who he said something in 2013, here it is 2020, and it cost him millions of dollars, right? So I think I know for myself, I don't go digging through your social media, but I may go browse it. But I think it's more about who you are, right? And if there's some questionable things on your social media, I'm going to ask you, because again, people grow up, people change, people go through different times in their lives, and we live on social media. So I can't hold you accountable all the time for your highlight reel on your social media, right? Or are you utilizing social media to build your brand in a more professional way, which is going to ultimately help you make a better decision? So it's tricky. I think it's still tricky, and it's always going to be tricky.
Yeah, Calvin, I think you're the good ones who are going to ask. I know a lot of people don't ask, right? It's they look at it, it's like I got too many other people to talk to. I'm just going to weed it out. It's not even worth the hassle. So at least you're going to ask the question. So tell us about both the watch outs and how people might take advantage, use social media to their advantage in the interviewing process, or as they think about.
Absolutely. I love that we went from Calvin to this side of it, because I do think there's a way that your online presence and footprint can be a detractor. But if you take control of it and really invest time and be thoughtful about, the specific channels that you are leveraging to build your brand, to engage in a discussion around whatever specialty you have or skill set that you have, it becomes a way that you can actually open doors for yourself and gain access to opportunities. I know, so my background is historically heavily focused on tech recruiting. And so hiring managers that I've had in the past, one of the first questions they'll ask is, do they have a GitHub? So it's just a repository of side projects that these technologists have. And if they have a GitHub, and if they're engaging in the community within GitHub, asking questions, answering questions, brainstorming, etc., that individual is seen as not just potentially a technical expert, but someone that's passionate, right? And so their brand with respect to the hiring manager has now been elevated because they're just spending time thoughtfully on various channels. So I do think if you spend time and don't just go out there and put your name and your brand out there for any type of conversation, but you're really thoughtful about where you engage and how you advance discussions and how you give others access to your knowledge and expertise, it can be a really big, powerful tool, not only for yourself, but others within the community that you sit in.
Absolutely. And I've also seen that as people think about recruiting at mid-level and more senior levels, right? It's what are the conversations they're engaging in publicly? Who are they connected with publicly? Because this is a person I want to be a leader and a role model and a sponsor and advocate for my company. And so it is looked at. Victoria, what would you say as you work with C-suite candidates?
Yeah, and I will tell you that you are being Googled, prior to, your social media footprint is very important. So if you're out there, make it private, or, make sure that it speaks to your brand for sure. Back in the day, we would go on the internet just to Google and make sure you didn't have a mugshot out there. Now we're looking for you posting about your political views. That's a huge red flag. So I would recommend you Google yourself, and make sure there's nothing out there that may be tying you to maybe personal views that may turn someone off, quite honestly. Also, what I really love is a lot of executives are doing more of this where on their LinkedIn profiles, yes, they're posting articles, they're engaging people to share feedback on it, but they're also sharing personal information like an event with their child or a golf event or a graduation. And they're just, or sharing a personal note about, how something meaningful happened, or, a mentor of theirs stepped up and helped them develop. I think that's huge. A lot of executives love to see that. I even share it when I am putting a profile together on a candidate for an executive role. I will add certain things from social media, articles that they've written, their activity on LinkedIn, just to give that hiring manager an idea or just more of a good feeling about that candidate.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Eric, I am not checking through the chat. So Eric, you'll let me know, or Carmen, let me know if something in there that I need to address.
Will do. Thank you.
Hey, Cheryl, I had one really tactical build perhaps around social media. And this doesn't apply to, I think, all organizations, but some of the larger organizations that do have a mature LinkedIn presence, if you will, their recruiters have the ability to look at which candidates are engaged or liking or following their careers page. And if you're thinking about how we build the top of the funnel in terms of recruiting and sourcing talent, you want folks that are engaged with your brand. You want folks that are following General Mills or Q Talent, right? Because they're interested, they're staying on top of what it is that you're doing. And so that is a way for you to get yourself on the radar and stand out to a degree amongst the thousands and thousands of folks that are applying. So really tactical, but engage with the brands that you're interested in.
I love that. Inside scoop, right?
Yeah.
So is saying he's looking at people who are looking at General Mills. I love that. Thanks. Let's go to the next phase. Let's go to during the interview, right? You're across from a recruiter or a manager or an executive in the interview process. Maybe let's potentially start with the negative. Calvin, what's the worst thing you've seen people do? Like in the interview where you're like, I can't believe this clown up and did this. What's the worst thing?
God, that's a loaded question. For me, I think.
Well, maybe put this. The worst thing that people may not know is bad, right? I know people know, don't go late and don't look crazy, but like, what's something that people, they don't know this is a watch out, but it really is a watch out.
Come back to me. I need to think on that one for a minute. I can jump in on this one. Okay. Absolutely.
It sounds like you have a story, Victoria. Sounds like you have a story.
I will tell you that, to your point, if I am directly working with, if the hiring manager sits on the C-suite, or if they're an SVP, EVP, whatever that is, there are two things. I've had very strong talent call me from their bed, okay, like literally on Zoom. They're still in bed, and because they said, well, you're just a recruiter, right? And I will finish the call, but I will not present them. I've had that happen, especially during like post-COVID. It's happened a lot. The second thing that drives me nuts is someone in their room. They may have their desk in their room or whatever, or in their house, and it's a total mess. The bed is unmade. It is just, the clothes are everywhere. You see trays of food in the background in the living room. And for me, that's a huge red flag as well. I cannot, if we're doing Zoom, I can't present you to, that hiring manager. I just can't. It was just a bad decision. You didn't think through presentation. So right now, this day and age, when we're no longer having to necessarily interview face to face, So if you're in California and the manager sits in New York, this is going to be a Zoom interview. So not only are you expected to look groomed, groom yourself, but your background absolutely needs to be clear of clutter. It's all part of your presentation. So that's a huge red flag for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you touched on 2 points. One is everything communicates, right? And everyone in the process, right, can say yay or nay. Whether it's the executive assistant, whether it's the scheduler, whether it's the recruiter, don't sleep on them, because everything communicates. And then the second thing, that you said is, in terms of presents, in terms of your bed's messy, etc. I take it as either it's a sign that you don't care, right? Or second, which is a bigger thing, is you have poor judgment, right? I'm going to bring you in my cut, and you don't have judgment enough to ensure that your background is clear. How am I going to trust you with a multi-billion-dollar business, and you don't have good judgment to make sure the crap ain't out of your room before you on the Zoom call? So that's like, yeah, poor judgment. Nah, I'm out.
Well, what happens if you have a 2.5-year-old that takes the blanket in the back of your room and just throws it on the ground all the time?
I have forgiveness for that. I'll tell you, I do have forgiveness. We work at home of the 2-year-old walk by mistake, or the dog bark.
The dog, yeah.
That stuff, because that's unplanned. It happened, and it's etc. It's the where you could have actively done something, and you chose not to.
So Victoria did say, I was going to say the kind of the messy background. She gave a much better description. But I would say one of the other things is there's so many platforms too that we utilize for video calls, Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, whatever it is. And when someone says, I'll just say it this way, hop on, spend time, an hour the day before, testing your audio and testing that you have all the necessary downloads to be able to utilize it. Saying I can't figure this out and that's causing you a delay, and now we're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes in because you didn't take the time to prep. I mean, coach used to tell me you're 5 minutes late. If you're 5 minutes early, you're late, right? I mean, that still applies in business. So take the time to make sure that all of your audio and your video, and you have what you need, you have the software downloaded to be prepared for the interview. Don't do it 10 minutes before, because it's not an excuse to be late, in my opinion.
This is a little bit of a left. It's not controversial by any means, but it's something that my team talks about and I've experienced with candidates too often, unfortunately. But like the very simple question of like, tell me about yourself, to open up an interview. And the candidate used that as an opportunity to tell the life story. And before you know it, 5, 10, 12, 15 minutes has gone by. The recruiter hasn't said a thing, or the hiring manager hasn't said a thing. And you know that they have 4 cats and a blue car. So just use the time that you have really wisely, and be mindful of just talking at somebody versus engaging in a discussion to unravel like what you can bring to the table.
100%.
That's so true. And I even tell people, when people say, tell me about yourself or your life story, read between the lines. Right? They're not asking to tell me all about yourself. They're telling me is, why should I be talking to you? What's your brand? What's your brand? What are your experiences that you're going to elevate that make you the best candidate for this role or this position? So tell me about yourself is not, I was born in small Detroit, Michigan. I have 5 sisters, and that's not what they're asking. So make sure that you have, hey, I got that, to your point, 2 minute or less, my brand story, that says I am it for this job.
Yeah, I think when people ask you that, what you should hear is, why am I sitting across from you?
Yes. Why
are you sitting here today? And you always want to bring in a couple things from your past, definitely bring in present, and then bring in just a couple things about your future goals. Why am I sitting here across from you today? And that will, and it's really kind of like a pitch, really, but it should be under 2 minutes for sure. I agree with that.
Hello, Cheryl. Just a follow-up on that, if I may.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a perspective from the candidate side is that, you've already seen my resume, you understand my background, you think I'm qualified for the role, you wouldn't be interviewing me. So are there specific items that the recruiters are looking for that's different than your resume? Or is it just to validate that what's in your resume is really you? So any guidance there?
I'll jump in on that one. Oh, go ahead, Victoria.
No, go ahead. I can wait. Yeah.
I was going to say, for me, when I asked that question, I ultimately kind of want to I really just want to know where you are in your career, right? Why are we to that point? Like, why are we having this conversation? What has brought you to this present moment right now, right? And I think that's where Victoria touches on. There's a couple of things going on in my past. There's a reason why you're looking to leave your current organization, whether it's culture or whatever those 5 key points are. And you have, for whatever reason, were presented this opportunity, whether I reached out or you found it, whatever it is. And then this is what you're looking for in a new opportunity. I think to Victoria's point, I think we just want to know those key points that you can touch on in a minute to a minute and a half as to why we're having this conversation. Yeah, we've seen your resume. We see a lot of resumes, and the paper, paper, phone call, all those things people can really skate by. So if you can give me something again where you've put some thought into it in that first minute and a half, that gives me more buy-in to, okay, this is going to be someone that I want to have a conversation with. There's probably more here than what we're seeing on the surface. Then that to me gets me more excited to continue to move on with the conversation.
Yeah, and when I've said a couple pieces from your past, present, future, it was really about telling them things that you have done that relate to the position that you're interviewing for. And you're doing it in such an upbeat way, and you're explaining to them exactly why you're interested. So you give them those little bullets, and that you make that connection for them. And then you say, and when I saw this opportunity, I really thought this would be perfect, and I want to explore more, and find out more from you about it, and share and really share, my experiences. So, and that's what I meant by that.
I think Calvin and Victoria did a beautiful job of articulating that. What I would say, maybe just, hopefully this is value add. I don't know many recruiters that actually love resumes. I personally hate them. They're all the same. It's words on a piece of paper, right? And so you're investing a lot in a piece of paper that we have maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes to glance at to tell your entire career story and how you can add value. And so that question is an opportunity, to Victoria's point, to tie it all together and say, this is how I'm right for this role. So don't just let the piece of paper tell your story.
I love that. I love that. And I always tell people, what's your wow factor?
Yeah.
Like, your story also have to have a wow, so just think about, what's my wow factor? What's going to make me memorable to people who talk to people all day and interview people all day and interview, what's the average? 8 to 10 people for positions.
Mm-hmm.
More senior level, it's less, 3 to 4. But why do I stand out? What is it that I did? That's why. What's my wow? I just wowed them in this interview.
That's superb, because I always tell people, when you tell your story, others should want to repeat it. That interviewer should go get on Slack and say, "Oh my God, I just had the best interview with this. I can't wait for y'all to meet him or her."
I'm stealing that, Victoria. I love that.
Yes, let's address this one thing before we go to the after. There's always a question about what weaknesses do you have, or or where have you failed, and tell me about that. I personally, as I've interviewed people, I have told people that is not your time to tell people you lied, steal, or killed. Right? That's not a level of honesty that we want. To me, what it is, hey, what is it that I may do well, but I have a turnaround story about it, or I am doing something about it, or I've neutralized it. So I don't know, again, I think about that as some of my horror stories I've had in interviewing people, so what advice would you give to the question, how have you failed?
Yeah, and I think you just touched on something that I think is really important to highlight, Cheryl. Whatever story you tell, you don't necessarily want to paint it in a way that suggests you are always making the wrong decision. You are always disorganized. You are always too aggressive, whatever the adjective is. There's a specific story, a specific project where you did one thing potentially wrong, right? And you reflected back on it, and here's what you've learned, and here's how you've applied that learning and wisdom to the next project, the next opportunity. But if you tell several stories, or if you make it seem like you're really off, you just dug your own grave. You're not getting any jobs. So I think it's, again, being thoughtful and recognizing, to your point, Cheryl, that question in some way, shape, or form is going to come. And so think back on your experience and identify one or two initiatives that you've been a part of that things didn't go necessarily the way we wanted, but how did you learn from them, and how can you wrap that into a hero story, as I think I've heard you say before. Like, you are the hero of that story, Cheryl, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you've wowed them, like, wow, this person's really wise and they're humble.
I learned my lesson and I pulled myself up by my bootstraps.
Exactly.
To do that. Victoria, think about more senior levels. Like, if someone's going for a six-figure or multi-six-figure, job and position, how might that answer change, if it does?
Yeah, I mean, because I think Soel's response really spoke to failures, right? When was a time that you give us an example of when you failed, right? And how you turn that around. But in regards to like weaknesses, we all have them. And that is a good time to be honest, right? And to your point, kind of pivot a little. And one of my favorite examples is, when, and I tell candidates to say this all the time, I do, I take on too much. I've been coached that I need to delegate more. I've been taking on too much. So give that example and then explain how you've been better at delegating. Know when to lift, when to dig in and be hands-on. That to me is a great way of saying, okay, you are a people leader, you have experience, you've full circle. You know exactly when it's time to lead, when it's time to delegate, and when it's time to dig in. And, maybe it's a finance position. And you can say, for years, I've had a team to run all of my reports, customize this, et cetera, and I don't know Excel. So what I had to do, I moved to a startup. And because I had such a lead team at the startup, I had to build those Excel reports for the board, for board meetings. Well, what did you do? I had to get in there and take Excel lessons at night. So those are examples that I give executives to prepare them, because I don't want to hear weaknesses that, you have a low emotional IQ. Like, it's not going to help. So be honest, but also you need to be very strategic in how you answer that question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Last shift before we go to breakouts. After the show, it's the after party, right? So it's the after interview, right? It's after the interview. Okay. Thank you notes. I think everyone knows to send a thank you note. It could be now text or et cetera. But what else, right? What else should people be doing after the interview to continue to be seen as a successful candidate?
It's a tough one.
Follow up. Follow up. It not with just a recruiter, but even with and I've seen this happen quite a bit. Let's say you didn't get the job, but you were a finalist. How you respond is very important, because sometimes the managers don't make the right decision, or they'll have another opportunity and they'll want to refer you to someone that's at another company or in another department. And how you respond to not getting that job, or how slow the process may be moving, is really important. It's really critical. It shows a lot, just in your personality and how you would manage a team, or even be a peer of theirs. So I would say have great follow-up skills.
I've heard Go ahead, so.
Oh, please go ahead.
I've heard, you know, as far as a follow-up and follow-up skills, I think there's one thing to send a follow-up, but I know a lot of folks, someone like myself, I take notes a lot of times when I'm listening to someone and if I'm doing an interview. And when you send that follow-up, if you can send the key specific takeaways back to that person, telling them thank you, but then putting, following up and 3 or 4 bullet points that are specifically from the conversation to let them know that you were listening to everything that they said and you heard everything. Let them know that you were invested in the conversation, and I think that adds a layer to that follow up, and it just makes you look that much better because you're putting. Anyone can say thank you for your time and it's been great. Hope whatever, but when you put in those specific bullet points, I think that adds another layer to that. And I think that goes with any follow-up, whether you're sending a follow-up to a family member, friend, prospect, whoever it is. That's something that I've learned years ago.
Absolutely.
The only build I would have on that, Calvin, is, and I've seen this happen with a couple of candidates, a little bit more senior, but what they'll do is they'll layer in an article that they're reading that's relevant to the conversation that they had. Or, hey, I was listening to this podcast and here's a snippet, and layer that into their follow-up. And it's this idea of adding to the conversation, advancing the conversation. And what that tells whoever's the receiver of that message is this person is following our business. This person's following, right? And immersed in the financial services industry, for example, if that's what it is. And so it just elevates you again, and elevates your brand, and shows that you're serious about what you're doing. And I think to piggyback on Victoria's comment, follow up, but don't annoy, right? There are some candidates that will hit you up 2-3 times a week and you're like, I don't have an update. And that it's a totally fair thing to want an answer and to want a response, but you're creating tension in that interaction. And just depending on who it's received by, could create, an unfavorable response, I suppose.
I love that follow-up, but don't annoy. And really the article too, because again, that's the wow factor.
Exactly.
Hey, it is. I've thought about it, and especially people who are going for expert roles or more senior roles, is, hey, I'm following the industry, or I'm following the tech, or whatever that is, and that demonstrates that. The last thing that I would add is, even if you don't get the role, especially if you're working with recruiters, internal and especially external, is if they're looking at other roles and great people, right? Great people know great people. Recruiters like to know great people. If you have helped them, like, hey, you know what? I may not be right for this role, Victoria. That was really great. Nice meeting you. Excuse me, nice meeting you. But here are 2 other people based on what you said you needed. You may want to think about. They're friends of mine, and please keep me in mind for the future. Victoria's like, wow, okay, Cheryl's cool. All right, you know what? I'm vested in her. This may not have worked, but I'm going to keep my eye out and figure out something for Cheryl.
I love that.
Lovely.
That's a great way to pay it forward too, right, Cheryl?
Exactly. And you're helping your network, right? You're helping your network. Yeah. This is great conversation, and we're going to go a little bit deeper, in this conversations, to give everyone a chance to ask more questions, to actually, if you have specific situations you want to cover. So we're going to break out into breakout rooms. We can get the slides. So what we're going to do as the recruiters, we're going to have rooms that are going to talk about before the interview, during the interview, going deeper there, and after the interview. And after the interview is also going to include, if people are interested in mock sessions. Like, I tried to answer this question this way. Tell me what you think about that. Right. Tell me what you think about it and how I should think about it. So we're going to have 3 rooms. And so Calvin's going to be in room 1, looking at before. Victoria, room 2, during. So it's going to do after the interview, as well as is a practice sessions. Again, I literally have this answer and I want feedback on how do I give that to a question. Okay. So I think Eric is going to put up something, and people are you get to self-select your room. Right? So you select the room that you want to go deeper in and have the most interest in. And we're going to spend about 20-ish minutes within those rooms and then just come back and debrief as a large group. Okay, Eric, over to you to take us into breakout rooms. And you guys select room 1, 2, or 3, depending on what area you want to know the range in which the position pays, and be ready to state your case, right?
Yeah.
You know, based, it's rooted in something about why you should be paid that. But we'll definitely try to pop those links, you know, at Glassdoor, what is it, salary.com,
In the Bureau of Labor.
Bureau of Labor, you know, understand what those things pay.
Thank you.
And then the last point, just as an interviewer, is, yeah, don't ask about salary till you're pretty far along and confident you'll get the job. I tell people, you know, well, I'm looking to negotiate. I'm like, you don't have anything to negotiate. You don't have a job. No one has offered you anything. So what are you negotiating? So, you know, wait till they want you. Okay, all right, okay, now it's on. Now let's talk.
Gotta get them.
You want me now. All right. Well, this has been just such a fabulous discussion, and just appreciate the engaged conversation. Eric, if you can put the slide up with the bios, that would be great as we go to a close of our just wonderful expert panelists. And I just want to ask Calvin, Victoria, and so a last question. They have participated in this, but of course have worked with a lot of other groups and teams, and make sure you guys keep in touch with them when that slide goes up, and we'll send these out afterwards. But starting with you, Calvin, and Victoria, and so what's the one piece of advice that you would leave this group with, you know, for interviewing for success? It can be built on the conversation, but if you had to, in 30 seconds or less, a minute or less, your one piece of advice that you would leave the group with. I'll start with you, Calvin.
So Julius asked me a question about, you know, making a move, because he's been with his current employer for 20 plus years. And he said, when is the right time to reach out to a recruiter? And I said, and I think we all agreed in the room, is right now, right? So time doesn't wait on anyone. Don't get comfortable, right? Work where your butt's at, as coaches always say. Wherever you're working, work hard where your butt's at. But you're always interviewing every day. So don't get comfortable, and, you know, take that leap, find that opportunity, and continue to network and look for it, because it could have happened today during this call. You just never know.
And reach out before you need it. Just build relationships.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I always tell people, you know, stay connected. Even if you love your job, just, again, if nothing else, it reinforces your worth and where you are now. It's like, okay, I'm good. I see what's out there. I see that. Okay, I'm good. Love it. Victoria, what's your one piece of advice?
Cheryl, you just said it, and it really is expanding your network.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, like, connect with people, different people, but find common ground. They don't have to be in your department. They don't have to be at your company. They don't have to be in your city or state. You know, attend. I think what a lot of us do, Black people, people of color, we are so good at what we do. We have our head down. We are masters. We know it. We look up 60 hours in the week have passed, and we are delivering. But you know what? We never got up. We didn't walk in people's offices. We didn't go to any evening events. We didn't join any associations. Please expand your network. It's so, because people just want to know what you're able to bring to the table. And they're going to remember. Cheryl's going to remember that person that she met a year ago, and she's going to start going through her Rolodex to find them. So yeah, expand your network. That's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I do. I look people up. Wait a minute, look at LinkedIn. What did I say I met them? Etc. I just had an opportunity. I just talked to someone who made that person we should talk to. So absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. And Victoria is the epitome of network, from Wall Street to Broadway to, she has a JD. So her kind of network is diverse and varied. So thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Yeah,
advice.
I think Calvin and Victoria hit the really important pieces. I think going back to the purpose of this gathering, right? It's interviewing. I think a mistake folks makes is they're really uncomfortable with the idea of receiving feedback from folks they trust and folks around them around how they interview. So I think it's really important to think about who you surround yourself with and who you bring into the circle of when you are interviewing, how you show up, how you're presenting, and how you're telling your story. So I think practicing, and that can be in the form of networking calls or just taking calls from recruiters when they're reaching out to you and getting that practice, but also just sitting down with someone that you know is going to give you the real and say you sounded like a fool there, or that hit the mark, and having them offer feedback when you're interviewing and just practicing so that when it's game time, you've already built the muscle memory. You've already told the story, and it's just really delivering it to that individual in front of you right there.
That's great.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Can I come back?
Thank you. Thank you so, and I appreciate it. As I mentioned, Works leads our practice at General Mills. I know, I think he's going to be with us in November when we host the session there. So thank you so much for being here. And again, my piece of advice to everyone is to know your value, right? You know what I mean? Because if you know your value, then you won't ever question your worth, right? If you know your value, if someone says no, you're like, that's okay, because that wasn't for me. That doesn't impact, that doesn't impact my value. If I know my value, I'm going to look for a place that accepts me for who I am.
Exactly.
So know your value and know that, and that is going to put you in the right place. Yeah. Thank you all so much. You have our contact information here. Please reach out if there's any additional questions. And with that, Carmen, I think back over to you.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much to our amazing panelists. So Sohail, Cheryl, Victoria, and Calvin, y'all killed it in my Southern voice. I know TC Band, we really appreciate this. And thanks for everybody for the great participation as well. If you want more content like this and to have it either virtually or in person, trust me, you should show up at our November the 4th session. It's a Saturday, and that will be our development day for TC Band. It's TC Band 16, also the 10-year anniversary. So it's going to be something to look forward to. So you'll see that come out here very soon. And again, just thank you so much to everyone, and go forth, have a great day, know your value, because you won't question your worth. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.